In tonight's episode, we continue our journey into the various states of the US and legends and lore and creatures residing there. If you want to watch the catch-up on the series, I have left links in the description below. But before we get into today's video, be sure to go ahead and slap that subscribe button because I release storytelling of the mysterious and supernatural every other day. Let's go. Kansas joined the Union as the 34th state in 1861. Known more commonly as the Sunflower State and home to a giant ball of twine, Kansas has a darker side regarding cryptids. It is said that several types of cryptids inhabit the state, and each one has its own terrifying story. For example, the Deer Woman, said to inhabit the woodlands as far as the Pacific Northwest. This indigenous cryptid likes to lure her victims, usually men, to their deaths using nothing more than a song. Her voice is so hypnotic that it is irresistible to all men. Her beauty is legendary and fools many. As legend goes, the Deer Woman has two very distinct sides to her. The first is a beneficial and loving side. However, this is reserved for men that are good to women and children. For the men that are cruel, a Deer Woman becomes vengeful and is said to use her ire to lure men into a trap where they perish. Her background is one of sadness and tragedy. The victim of a savage assault, she was found in the woods by her people, lying next to a young deerling that was there so the woman would not suffer alone. Because of what she went through as a mortal, either the gods or the spirit of the deer granted the dying woman a wish. Her only desire was for revenge against those who had harmed her. Seeing this as a worthy and justifiable request, her wish was granted. She rose from the forest floor a strong and beautiful young indigenous maiden, able to enact her revenge. Judgment from the Deer Woman is said to be swift and harsh, bringing justice to those that wronged women and children. The only way to banish the Deer Woman is to use a chant and tobacco, or look at her feet. Looking upon her feet and seeing her hooves is said to be a recognition for her and who she is. Now, this must be done before she lures the man to his fate. The moral of her story is that only seeing a woman for her beauty is to ignore her other fine qualities. Men who ignore these qualities for the sake of beauty are thought to be a poor choice in a mate. Therefore, they must face their fate. Then there's Sinkhole Sam. Huge snakes aren't a rarity in some parts of the United States, especially in the South. But Kansas isn't where one would typically think they would see a snake called Sinkhole Sam. It all began when Iman Lake in McPherson County was drained, which left a few sinkholes around the area that were little more than just puddles. However, one of these sinkholes had enough water left in it to retain fish. Two unnamed brothers were utilizing the big sinkhole fishing area when Sinkhole Sam allegedly made an appearance. The snake-like creature is described as being at least 15 feet in length and as wide as a car tire. There have only ever been a handful of sightings in the area, and there are no reports of the mysterious creature in any of the other waterways. One of the last reported sightings was actually by Albert Naufeld and George Reger in the 1920s. The two teens were also fishing the big sinkhole when Sam decided to make an appearance. One of the boys reportedly took a couple of shots at Sam from a bridge, but could not determine if he hit the creature. As rumors spread about the sighting, people began visiting Iman Lake to get a chance to see old Sam. There were a few unsubstantiated reports from visitors of sightings, but no hard physical proof. Inman Lake had several caverns under the waterway. It is summarized that Sinkhole Sam called these caverns home before the lake was finally drained. The draining of the lake is thought to have caused the creature to make its way to the surface, and there have been many debates over the years about what the creature could be. There's speculation that it's a giant earthworm, but this smaller species grows to just over 3 feet. Giant worms are also found in South Africa, and these grow to well over 22 feet long. Australia's version of the giant earthworm reaches lengths of up to 9 feet. While these are known species and people agree that this is probably what was seen in Inman Lake, people still speculate about other reptilian types that could have been the culprit, those being like a freshwater eel or maybe a giant sea worm. These water dwellers can reach lengths from just over 3 feet up to 26 feet. Then there is the huge snake theory, maintaining that some species of snakes, like boas, adapt to water quite favorably and are comfortable on the water as they are on land. As interesting as these theories are, a small number of people think the being is cryptozoological in nature. Whatever the being is, Sinkhole Sam is one of the area's most beloved cryptid stories, with locals asking people to not harass the snake should they see it. Kentucky joined the Union on June 1st, 1792, making it the 15th state, and known more commonly as the Bluegrass State and home to the Kentucky Derby. This state also has a newer breed of cryptid called Barilla, reported in 1972. Now this came about its name from the man that first reported the creature, resembling half a bear and half a gorilla in 1972. Said to live in the dense forest of Kentucky, the Werewolf of Kentucky has been scaring campers and hikers away from the trails and campgrounds of the great outdoors. It kills for pleasure. One rancher had reported when he found that one of his cattle were completely found torn apart. In an interview, Jason and Jeff Caldwell from Mount Sterling, Kentucky, stated that they came face to face with the fearsome creature, telling reporters that the experience has haunted them ever since. Jason's story was told as follows. Jason was camping with 5 friends in the summer of '99. The group had planned a fishing trip for the next day to get ready to graduate. Only having one small tent for the 6 men to share, 3 of them decided to sleep in the truck, and the remaining 3 took the tent. After saying their good nights to one another, they all retired early so they could wake around 5 in the morning. Having only been asleep for a couple of hours, a noise in the forest startled everyone awake. One of the tent's men shouted that something was around the tent. Jason opened the zipper to inspect the noise, thinking they may have attracted a bear or possibly a mountain lion, and he says, I quote, "I saw it 40 yards away. Tall, 6 foot, 6.5 foot, maybe 7, gray silver-like creature." He recalls the terrifying ordeal. And then he went on to describe the creature. You know, it wasn't a human-like face, but a little bit of a long muscle, and then it was gone. It scared the young men so bad that they packed up right then and there and returned home, never to camp in the area again. Jason's father believes his son had his own horrifying experience with the Barilla. In 1996, Jeffrey, or Jeff Caldwell, was returning home from a coon hunting competition early one morning. At around 4:30 that morning, as Jeff was driving the route to his home, he said something crossed the road in front of him that was about 6 to 7 feet tall, with a muzzle and pointed ears, and had a kind of shimmery silver-brown coat. The creature ran into the woods, and a shocked and shaken Jeff drove on home. Who would make up a story like that? He had said in an interview. Mount Sterling sits at the foot of the Appalachian Mountains in a small town of around 7,000 people. Situated in eastern Kentucky, much of the surrounding forest is referred to as virgin forest because it has remained untouched by anyone. This would help keep the creature well hidden, but there have been other reports and some more deadly. Like in 1972, a farmer saw a bipedal animal cross the road a few yards away. The man went to the local paper to report what he had seen, and not knowing what to call it from the description he had given, the local newspaper simply dubbed the cryptid Barilla. After the farmer, there were more sightings reported to the local PD. The next significant report would come from Barilla investigator Ron Coffey. As a boy, Coffey and his cousins were in the woods when they encountered the alleged beast. Reportedly, it chased the trio for 20 feet before taking off deep into the woods. The boys' description was remarkably similar to those given before them to authorities. Dark gray silver hair, bipedal, 6 to 7 feet tall, and a long snout was the standard baseline description. Since then, Coffey has been searching for the creature and has become somewhat of an expert on this elusive cryptid. The only known fatal attack happened in 1981 and was, interestingly, kept out of newspapers. Those that worked the case stated that government agents made the search and rescue members agree to never tell what they saw that day. I mean, if you think about it, if this case ever reached the ear of the public, it would cause mass panic, so of course it makes sense to have a cover-up. A group of teens was camping in an undisclosed location and someone found what was left of them. The remains were in pieces. One of the victims was found clutching a handful of silver gray hair. Another girl was found 20 to 30 feet up in a tree, also having a handful of the same color hair in her hand. After this incident, the stories seemed to dry up, according to Coffey. But in 2012, a rash of animal attacks would raise concerns again and make the residents of Mount Sterling fear stepping outside their front doors. For about 5 weeks over the summer of 2012, an independent reporter, Afton Fairchild, reported on several animal mutilations from the residents of the nearby town of Waddy, Kentucky. Livestock was being mutilated but not consumed. Fairchild covered these stories and learned that the attacks were all night. People were afraid to let their children play outside, and farmers had to shelter their animals to try and keep them safe. Even after the attacks had stopped, residents were affected by the mutilations for months. Fairchild sought the help of cryptozoologist Ron Coffey. He explained that the attacks that remained unsolved sounded very similar to those in '81. He stated that Barilla has an uncanny ability to disappear and remain unseen. But the residents of Mount Sterling and Waddy, Kentucky won't soon forget the bloodshed the creature is accused of leaving in its path over the last several decades. On April 30th, 1812, Louisiana became the 18th state to join the Union. Known for its great Cajun food and Mardi Gras, Louisiana is a hot destination for many people looking to party, attend Mardi Gras, or catch a ghost tour. The paranormal history of the Bayou State is rich in cultural backgrounds of its diverse population. It calls the coastal state home. Several cryptids also call Louisiana home, such as Bigfoot, the ivory-billed woodpecker, yes, it's described as a cryptid, the lutin, elves, pixies, even cats, especially white ones, the grunch, which is supposedly a group of albino dwarves that live in the forest outside New Orleans in isolation. Because they are so isolated, inbreeding was practiced, and what was once human features had faded. They supposedly became deformed with sharp teeth and that are goat-like. They are said to reside in the tall grass off of Grunch Road in New Orleans. And of course, the Honey Island swamp monster, said to resemble Swamp Thing and a cross between chimpanzees and an alligator. He uses his webbed feet to track and navigate the swamp, eating wild boars. There's also vampires, supposedly. Real ones. The few follies, which are Cajun fairies that can either bring you good fortune, as they could be a returning spirit of a deceased loved one, supposedly, or they are also said to be sinister in their intentions and wreak havoc on the person they are after, often leading them to their demise in the swamps. And of course, you have Bigfoot. There's multiple reports of dogman and werewolf-like creatures, also upright reptilian creatures, and half-man, half-alligator beings. I mean, really, Louisiana seems to be a melting pot of the supernatural, cryptids, and paranormal. Even though there are many cryptids to choose from, Louisiana appears to host some of the most powerful, scary, and vicious. The Rugru. Said to be almost ashamed of its appearance, the Rugru is described as having a human-like body with a wolf-like neck and head. Standing 6 feet tall and being very lean, the monster is reportedly the victim of damnation or curse, and therefore it is ashamed of its attributes. The lush vegetation of the swamps and forest is where this creature roams, free to hunt the prey of animals and possibly humankind. Another legend of the Rugru says that the beast is sent by the devil himself to pursue those that practice Catholicism, but don't observe. Known more commonly as a wolf or werewolf, those that break the rules or laws of the Catholics for 7 years straight are damned to become a werewolf. Yet another legend says the curse comes about handed down by a witch, and the Rugru must remain cursed for 101 days, during which time they will be human by day, but look sickly and fear the locals finding out their plight. But by night, the monster must hunt to satisfy its cravings for flesh and blood. After 101 days are up, the curse can be transferred to a new victim, but only if the current one has bitten or scratched someone while they were in their wolf-like form, thus transferring the unfortunate curse. The last story involves an adolescent boy who wouldn't follow directions and supposedly ended up cursed. The child had walked into town to fetch items for his ailing grandmother. Walking alone, he encountered a man that tried to strike up a conversation. The boy found him annoying and mostly ignored his advances in conversation until the man asked him if he could keep a secret. This was the boy's weakness because he was not a good confidant. The man locked eyes with the boy, transferring the curse he carried as a Rugru. He told the boy to rid himself of this curse, he must keep it a secret, and do it for 101 days, and finally find a suitable victim to pass the curse to. Within hours of receiving the curse, the young boy was telling anyone that would listen of his affliction. He was warned that he would remain under the curse of the spell forever if he did this. After a few days, he morphed into a Rugru and remained as such. He ran away into the forest of Louisiana, never to be seen again. Maine. Maine joined the Union of the United States on March 15, 1820, and became the 23rd state. Nicknamed the Pine Tree State, much of the area is covered in thick pine forest, known for its fresh lobster and other seafood. Maine is also home to the Acadia National Park, which receives over 2 million visitors annually. Being covered in lush forest and having a national park, it's easy to assume that they would also be home to some of the creepiest creature stories and legends in the northern states. Oh, and the International Cryptozoology Museum is also in Portland, Maine. The Wendigo. Maine has no shortages of animals with antlers, but one stands out above the others. The Wendigo. This isn't an animal, but rather a cursed human that has committed the ultimate taboo. They consumed human flesh. This is an ultimate sin in many cultures, but it is a particularly evil, unforgivable sin for most indigenous peoples. Wendigos are said to have once been shamans at some point, possessing the power to help ailing people. But instead of using their power for good, they turn to the dark side of magic and take the final step of cannibalism. This gives them a curse to walk the earth looking for victims to consume. Wendigos are said to have many characteristics depending on where they are and what state they're in. But most are described as shapeshifters that have antlers. They usually take the form of a sinister animal that their tribe sees as a bad omen should you encounter such a creature. In Navajo folklore, Wendigos, or shapeshifters skinwalkers, take the form of a coyote. A sly, mischievous character is seen as trouble, and should one cross the path of a Navajo, the person must turn around and seek an alternate route. While there does seem to be a lot of confusion on the difference between a Wendigo and a skinwalker, skinwalkers are primarily exclusive to the Navajo culture and region, and they seem to be a practice that originates from Mexico that the Navajo then perfected. Skinwalkers are more supposedly the shapeshifters, whereas Wendigos, they're not necessarily shapeshifters, more just cursed, and they seem to reside up north. Now that is the very short, digestible version, just to kind of give you an idea. Then there's the Spectre Moose. As early as 1500, hunters reported seeing a solid white moose weighing upwards of 1,500 to 2,000 pounds, standing 10 to 15 feet tall and sporting the most extensive set of antlers anyone had ever seen. It would just appear out of nowhere and just as fast disappear, leaving the person or people that saw it wide-eyed and mouth agape. Soon after spotting the majestic creature, something terrible would happen, such as flooding, a bad harvest, and other misfortunes. People started likening the moose to omens that the Mothman brought about upon a visit, and in 1890s, a hunter in northern Maine took a shot at the trophy moose. He reported becoming lost in the forest that he had hunted since childhood. He was lost for days, wandering around aimlessly, knowing he was doing it but feeling as though he couldn't control his direction. These claims were then dismissed as flights of fancy until a hunter from New York reported seeing a beast that he took a shot at. Howard Von Ness from New York had come to Maine on a hunting expedition. He became separated from his hunting party when he encountered the moose itself. For a moment, he stood in awe at the sheer size of this thing, then raised his rifle and shot it just above the shoulder. He then watched as the enraged animal began to snort and bellow while running around the forest at speeds that would be impossible for an average-sized moose. The furious animal was now hunting Van Ness. He took cover in a thicket of small trees and watched as the animal stalked. And in a final act of anger, the seemingly uninjured beast leapt over the man's hiding spot, running into the thick of the trees, and was never spotted by the hunter again. Reports of the Spectre Moose would go through the years with two more significant sightings. The first was a group of hunters that shot a moose and, cut it, and then hung it with the intentions of dressing it the following day. But when they awoke, the moose was gone, only to wander back into their camp later that evening with the throat still bleeding. The men reshot at it, but this time seemingly without any effect. The beast looked at the men, then slowly turned and walked into the night. In 2002, the moose was seen again in Franklin, and was seen by several people before the town's restaurant burned to the ground shortly after. Kind of reminiscent of the whole Mothman, right? Well, people still speak of the Spectre Moose, wondering if they have encountered a ghostly apparition or a rare moose that has been highly elusive. Massachusetts. Massachusetts joined the Union on February 6, 1788, making it the 13th state and one of the original 13 colonies, known as the Bay State, that has a whopping 5 bays. When the name of Massachusetts is mentioned, one usually thinks about Salem and the dark history tied to the horrific events from the witch trials. But many cryptids also call the Bay State home. Here is one of the most infamous legends, the Dover Demon. In the spring of 1977, Dover, Massachusetts is said to have been inundated with a demon that spread havoc in the town. On April 21st, 1977, around 10 p.m., a 17-year-old named Billy Bartlett encountered a 4-foot-tall demon with a head the shape of a watermelon. No nose, no mouth, and had glowing orange eyes. As reported to the Boston Globe in an exclusive interview, Bartlett stated, "It was a demon. I know I saw something." He was the only one that initially came forward with the story. Still, sometime later, 5 more people came forward stating they too saw the same creature, lending credibility to Bartlett's encounter. The Boston Globe ran the story along with another article in 1981 claiming that family pets were mauled by an unknown creature, including over a dozen cats and a couple of hogs severely injured with deep gashes to their backsides. When questioned about what the people in the town saw, most agreed it looked more like a mountain lion. After the hogs, there were no other reports of the Dover Demon nor the mountain lion. But more importantly, what do you guys think? Are all these cases, sightings, and stories just merely that, legend and myth? Or is there truly something mysterious, potentially supernatural happening in every single state and possibly the world? I'll let you decide. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, be sure to go ahead and slap that like button and leave a comment down below. I would love to know your thoughts and opinions. More importantly, if you're new to the channel, be sure to go ahead and hit that subscribe button for content just like this, because I release it every other day. As always, guys, I love you all. Keep an open mind, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.